Dipankarji, concerns are being raised over the election process, EVMs, delay in the announcement of the votes polled, and discrepancies between the votes polled and votes counted. So, how are opposition parties going to take it forward?
See, before the election, we arrived at one common suggestion, one common demand, that was 100% counting of VVPAT. Because otherwise, VVPAT itself becomes a misnomer. It's a voter verifiable paper audit trail. So if the voter doesn't verify, and if there is no real paper trail, so then what purpose does it really serve? But unfortunately, the Supreme Court didn't agree. The Election Commission also didn't agree. So I think now, at the end of the day, probably this country will have to get back to ballots. That is my personal feeling, our party stand. And I think it's a shared stand among many parties. I can't be too sure about all the parties in India. And this has nothing to do with election results. I mean, usually these BJP people, they say that this is a loser's argument. Every time you lose an election, then you talk about EVM. So that's not the case. After all, election is all about transparency and trust of the people. And there can be no trust without transparency.
But sir, what can be the possible way forward? Because you've approached Election Commission, you've also gone to the Supreme Court. So how do you take it forward from here?
I think that it has to be a kind of popular upsurge. Because if the system doesn't respond, how do you do? I mean, there are periods when the people make themselves heard in ways that the system has to respond eventually. How exactly that will happen? Because the results are such. In many local constituencies, people are not actually finding it convincing at all. So when such things happen across the board, and if people will strongly believe that the elections have been rigged, so you can think of a popular upheaval in the country. In a democracy, I think that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad thing. That's not something unheard of. So the people can make themselves heard, and that's the only way probably the system will respond to it.